practice our English by baking. And we're going to do a classic American dessert, apple pie. So I'd like to start just by telling you about the ingredients. The ingredients are all the different kinds of parts of the food that go in to make the pie. So we are starting with cane sugar. This is brown sugar. And salt. Coconut oil. Flour. Ground cinnamon, that I've shown you here, the cinnamon stick. This is what the cinnamon looks like. It smells very good. Nutmeg. Butter. And it's very important when you get butter to get a good quality butter because it makes all the difference. And then these green apples, we call these Granny Smith apples. And we use these because they are tart. That is, they're not sweet and they're not sour, they're right in between. It's a very delightful flavor, and you don't want them too sweet or the pie comes out with very little flavor. And then in terms of things that you will need to use, a mixing bowl, a pie dish, and a knife, a pastry knife. If you find that you don't actually have an oven, you can use these ramekins to make small little pies that you can actually put into the toaster oven. I know a lot of people in Asia don't actually have ovens. So if you find yourself in that situation, you can always use a ramekin and make small, personal-sized little pies. And then we also have, finally, the rolling pin. The rolling pin that we're going to use to make the crust. The second thing that you should know about making a pie is you're going to want to know what the recipe is. The recipe is the directions, the instructions that you need to follow to make the pie. And we're going to divide it up into 3 stages, 3 very easy stages. Number 1, the pie crust, which we're going to make on this surface. And I do want to say, people, make sure you clean your surface well because you're going to be putting this stuff right on the surface. We're going to be putting the dough and rolling it out on the surface, so it's got to be clean with a disinfectant and then with some water to take the disinfectant off because anything that's on the counter is going right into your belly. Secondly, we are going to make the pie filling. That's a delicious apple filling and that we're going to put inside the pie. And then the third thing, now not every pie has this, but our fancy Uncle Jeffrey, Chef Jeffrey pies are going to have what's called a lattice-top. This is a crisscross, beautiful top that you put on top of the pie to make it extra fancy and extra special. And you know what? Even if you use these personal pie ramekin dishes, you can still do the lattice and make it really nice for your friends. We're going to start by making the pie crust. And the pie crust is the outer part of the pie. It's the bottom part that's very crispy and which we'll put the filling in. So we're going to start with 2 cups of flour. Flour is a powdered form of wheat. We're just going to put it in this big bowl, like so. And then we are going to use the shortening. We're going to put this in little by little. Now this is actually coconut oil, and I got that because it's much easier to get in Asia than vegetable shortening is very hard. But coconut oil you can find, and we're going to put it in little by little. We're just going to cut the piece out and put it in like so. As we do that, we are really going to just mix it in. We use a fork actually. So you don't want to stir it like that. You want to cut it. Cut, 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 cut. And it's important to do that because otherwise the pie crust might get too humid. It might not have the right consistency. So you just really want to stir in that water little by little cutting it with the fork. This may be a lot of work, but it's going to be worth it, because otherwise you will have a pie crust that does not stick together. The final stage in making the pie crust is going to be taking all of this and making it into a ball. Have you ever wondered why apple pie is so famous in the United States? Why it's such a big part of the culture? Well, apples are actually not from the US. They were brought over from Europe, unlike pumpkins, which are native. So why apple pie? Not really sure that anybody knows, but one thing is that pies are very popular in England, but also in France and the Netherlands, and apple pie in particular. But the thing is, apples grow really well in the northeastern part of this country, which is where the first colonies were. And in the fall, when there was a harvest, that's when they would get their apples. So it was a big part, the apple pie, of the fall harvest celebrations. My guess is that's why they became so popular. But anyway, there you've got your ball. Little by little, I'm getting it smoothed out. If you're stressing out, that's a good way of relaxing. In the US also, it's sweet pies that are usually pies with sweet fillings that are very popular. And the apple pie and the pumpkin pie are probably the most popular. In the final stage here, we're going to roll it out. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut this ball with a knife in half. Half of it is going to be used for the pie crust, and half of it's going to be for the lattice that we put on top. Done that. Now we've got to take some flour and actually spread it all around so that the surface doesn't stick. So, if you're making a pizza, you do the same thing. You have to spread all of the flour around. Very good. Okay, so here we go. Now, we're going to take this and we are going to use our hands first and mash it down. And now we are going to use the rolling pin and roll it out. Another thing that you should know about pies is there are sweet pies and savory pies. Sweet pies and savory pies. Savory pies are the salty ones, which were the ones that were much more common in England, where the pies came from. We don't make a lot of those kinds of pies in the US. And they made the savory pies out of things like different kinds of meat. So pork, beef, mutton, which is sheep's meat. You want to make sure that you have a lot of flour on top of this when you're rolling it out. Make sure it is pretty thin when you're done. It's going to take a while to get it done right, but it is important that you put a lot of flour under and above when you're rolling it out. And then you want to cut it into a fairly circular shape that's bigger than the pie. You can see here because you want it to overlap. So it's got to be bigger than the pie dish, about 2 inches, which is about 5 centimeters. This is step 2 of the process, where we make our filling. We want to take our apples and peel them first so that they're like this. Then we want to core them. That's take out the middle part of them, the core. And we want to cut them up, first in halves, and then dice them. Dice them means that you want to cut them into fairly small pieces. They're going to look like these pieces here. That's about the size you want when they're diced. Once we have all of that, we're going to mix our spices and the rest of our ingredients in here. Our nutmeg. We want 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and our cinnamon. We want also 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And now we have the sugar. And I mentioned before brown sugar, but a lot of people also prefer using partially white sugar, so you could use half a cup of white sugar and then a quarter cup of brown sugar. That's going to give it a less of a caramelly flavor. And then we're going to use our wooden spoon to mix that in. So you can see it's kind of getting even there. Try not to crush the apples too much. Glorious aroma filling up the kitchen. And then we want to sprinkle a little bit of salt, not too much, but just what we would call pinches of salt sprinkled in. Okay? When we're done with that, we are going to put it into the pie shell that we've made earlier. Okay, and we might have some leftover filling. I think I may have made a little too much. And that's okay too, because you can use that later. You can make sauce with it. You can, as I said, you can make those small little pies with the leftover. But it looks like we have just enough here. The other thing that we want to do too is we have 2 tablespoons of butter. Now we're going to take those 2 tablespoons of butter and cut them up. Sometimes it can kind of stick to the knife, but we'll try to get that and cut up in little pieces as well as we can. Hopefully the kitchen's not too hot so it's not melting all over the place. And then you want to just sprinkle it all kind of evenly through your apple mixture. And that's the end of the filling stage. And now we're doing part 3 of the pie. This is, we rolled it out just like we did the bottom part of the crust and got it thin enough. And I've already cut off the jagged edges. And so now we are just going to cut this into strips, about 3/4 of an inch. So if you don't have a sense of inches, then you should probably take your ruler out to do the first one. But if you do, then you don't have to. I don't know if there's an interesting thing, if anybody knew where the name pie came from. But there's a bird called a magpie, which makes its nest by gathering all kinds of things that birds don't normally use in their nests. So shiny objects. The magpie has nests made of everything. So people that when they first started making pies probably about 1,000 years ago in England, they were named after the magpies because at the time when they made a pie, they would put anything they found in that was left at home. So it'd be all kinds of meat and organs, meat, kidneys, any kinds of things from inside, fat, lard, whatever you found that was left over, you put it into the pie, just like the magpie did. So now what we're going to do is we're going to lay this across the strips in what's called a lattice. A lattice is like a crisscross pattern, just like a basket has or a piece of fabric will be crisscross. You have a warp and a weft, so you go across like that. You want to probably leave, kind of stretch it over a little bit so you've got some left over you can pinch into the crust. Okay. And, depending on your skill, you can weave it in like this, just like a basket, under and over the other strips, okay? So until you have a beautiful woven basket look for the whole pie. So for those of you who really like crafts, this kind of comes close to it, this weaving part. If it isn't long enough, you can always pull it, okay, because dough does stretch, so you can always pull it a little bit. And then what you're going to do is slowly you're going to pinch it in to the crust. Now that crust, the edges, you would have already pinched them a little bit. And so now we're just going to make it part of the bottom by pinching it in. Now when we finished our lattice, we're going to go in for the bake, as they say. Going in for the bake. So make sure before you do that though, when you've completed the lattice, that you cut about 3-inch strip of aluminum foil and put it around the edge so it doesn't burn. Because if you skip this step, you'll be upset. It will burn. So make sure that you put the nice aluminum foil around the edge. Now we want the oven to be at 420 degrees. Make sure that you preheated it so it's nice and warm and toasty when you're going to go in. And we're going to put it in here for 40 minutes in the oven. Note, we're putting it on the middle rack. We've covered that with aluminum foil as well. So we're going to put it in real carefully like this. I would recommend using an oven glove so you don't burn yourself. Ta-da! We're done with the preparation. And it's going to bake. We can just relax. Make sure that we wait 40 minutes. Baking is very precise, so we don't want to leave it in too long or it'll come out a big lump of coal that you can't eat. So now we're going to take our pie out of the oven. Remember, it's been there 40 minutes and it should be ready. Make sure you wear your oven mitts. Ooh, delicious. We made a typical American pie with a lattice top, and we're going to get ready to enjoy this as soon as it's cooled down. I hope that you've enjoyed learning a little bit about pies, apple pie making, and about the English language and American culture. Till next time.